Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the War of Ideas. Unfortunately, it's not going to be very much of a fun one, at least at first, because as everybody who hasn't been living under a rock knows, Israel is officially at war with the terrorist organization based out of Palestine known as Hamas. We are going to talk about that. We're going to go through the news, but you've probably already heard the news. Mostly what we're going to talk about is the reaction to the news, the spectrum of reactions across the West in terms of their moral appraisals of the situation. I will do an analysis. I will actually be doing some devil's advocate for why people feel the way they do, but I will also be giving my own opinion in the strongest possible terms. We're also going to be discussing Columbus Day because that's actually a thing today. Usually, every year, it creates a bit of a hullabaloo. This year, not so much because obviously we are standing in a great shadow right now where nothing else really seems to matter. But we will talk about it a little bit as our second story of the day. And then finally, we're going to break down the recent business in the House of Representatives. Kevin McCarthy was just ousted as Speaker of the House by Matt Gaetz. The reason for that is something that we're going to talk about, if there is any reason at all, I suppose. For some reason, we're having trouble streaming to Rumble. It's been disconnected. I don't really know why that is. It's okay because even after I stream this, I will put it up as a video, and that will go to. I will make sure that that goes up on Rumble, even if they don't get it live. I don't know why. It just told me out of the blue that it's been disconnected. So, whatever. Anyway, so first things first is the business with Hamas. Quite the tragedy. We are reading from Newsweek for an example of just the kind of thing that's been happening. We have 0 viewers. That's okay. There was one guy, but now there's no guys. But it's okay. Again, this will get views once it goes up. So this is coming from Newsweek. We're just going to summarize a bit of the news, and then we're going to talk about the reactions. After breaking through Israel's heavily fortified separation fence from Gaza, Hamas fighters rampaged for hours Saturday morning. The fence is actually a touch fence. This isn't part of the article, where if something touches it, the Israelis are meant to be alerted, but there was some sort of cyber attack that took it out. So it was a slow response. The fence was broken in nearly 80 pieces. The Hamas fighters streamed across the fence and they started gunning down civilians and snatched people, according to many who had gathered in the desert near the Gaza border for a night of techno music, some secular festival. The death toll at the Supernova Festival, coinciding with the Jewish festival of Sukkot, was I butchered the pronunciation and I'm very sorry, but that's how it reads to me. It was becoming clear on Monday at least 260 bodies were recovered by the paramedics just at the festival alone. The death toll overall is around 900. And that's according to Israel's rescue service Zaka. Festival organizers said they were helping Israeli security forces locate attendees who are still missing. Some of the missing people actually include Americans, which we can presume are dead, which also creates some geopolitical complications. Among the shocking images and videos of the festival that circulated on social media was one of a woman identified as a 22-year-old Shani Luke, who was lying face down in the bed of a pickup with 4 militants. Another showed a young woman identified as 25-year-old Noah Argamani being abducted by men on a motorcycle. Other clips showed festival goers running across open fields to escape gunmen. These people were abducted to be held as hostages or to be killed and likely to be raped either way, the way that Hamas tends to operate. Pretty horrific stuff. There's videos all over the internet. You can find them. I'm not going to play them, but I encourage you to look at them because it's important to see what's actually happening. There's a lot of argument. It's kind of hard to tell what's going on in between Palestine and Israel most of the time because there's just so much counter signaling from both sides of the conflict and the debate. So just looking at raw footage, I find is immensely clarifying as to the realities on the ground. Working with new drone footage, it was able to assemble. People were able to figure out what happened. An analysis of satellite imagery showed that the festival was held about a kilometer away from the Gaza border, 5 kilometers away from the Gaza border. Pardon me. They tried to evacuate people, but they couldn't do it fast enough. And ultimately, They poured in through the fences and started gunning down civilians and kidnapping people en masse. There's multiple videos. You can see people who are dead. You can see babies next to dead parents. You can see some of the most horrific things you've ever watched. I forced myself to watch them this morning. I recommend that all of you do that as well. You know what? We are going to show them, actually. Decision has been made. Call has been made. We are going to watch them. Give me a second here. Technical difficulties make me stupid. There we go. Yep. There we go. Here's some. This is the Newsweek article, so here's a couple of the videos.
תראו, יורים באנשים, תראו. תראו לסרוטים. תראו, אנשים מקבלים יריות.
So this one's not too bad. Newsweek is reporting on how they streamed across the border. There's other videos of their actual activities, which I could find, but that's going to be it there. Here's some dash cam video from CNN World.
Inside Israel, the death toll from Hamas's attack has now climbed past 700. At least 260 were killed at a music festival. And we are getting new details and images from that day. And we want to warn our viewers, you may find this next video disturbing. Dashcam footage from one car shows militants shooting and killing people at point-blank range before looting their belongings. The video has no audio but sheds light on the terror that unfolded Saturday at the festival site near the Israel-Gaza border.
Yeah, so
we do have video, though, of the airstrike.
This is what has happened in response. So in response to this, Israel has declared war. Officially, there's been a lot of back and forth ever since 2005, roughly 2006, 2007. Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip completely. They have no jurisdiction, as far as I'm aware. They don't participate in that area of the world. What they do is they supply water and electricity for free. And as far as I'm aware, they've conducted a few operations and incursions to attack Hamas bases, which is difficult because Hamas uses things like hospitals and elementary schools as staging grounds for their military. They hide behind civilians, which is a war crime. But they do it anyway. So I think that Israel has been involved in the Gaza Strip in those limited capacities, but overall they've kind of left that area alone. They've given it to them. So while they have incursions and skirmishes, this is the first all-out war. And you can see
hitting a refugee camp
Israel
in Gaza. It is graphic video. We want to warn you before we play it.
Yeah, so this video says that it's targeting refugee camps. I'm not sure how correct that is. Again, you have to take into account, this is part of the counter signaling that is an interesting nuance that you have to get into. As far as I'm aware, Israel has no real interest in taking out random refugees. It's more likely the case for them that Hamas has been known, again, to hide behind hospitals and civilians. So it's probably the case that Hamas was using that as a military staging ground and, they didn't get out. What Israel tends to do, again, this is as far as I'm aware, is send text messages and send shaky bombs. So what they do is they'll text, if Hamas is in a building, right, they're hiding in a civilian population, they'll send texts to that area and they'll send a bomb that shakes the building but doesn't take it down as a warning to leave. And then 5 minutes later, they'll blow it up. Unfortunately, this is war now. And some civilian casualties are probably and unfortunately unavoidable. which is horrific. But this leads us pretty neatly into a question about the moral situations here, the moral landscape here, if you will. And there's a diversity of opinions, so we're going to go across, and there's a wide diversity. So opinion number one, which I don't think that anybody who I've ever consorted with agrees with this, but this is position number one, is that this is good because the Jews shouldn't exist, right? You just have an anti-Semitic version, which is Hamas's attack was good because anti-Semitic reasons, because they just want to kill all the Jews. Obviously, that's evil. That's a completely evil perspective, and I'm pretty sure that's the perspective Hamas is coming at things from, because Hamas didn't just tactically attack military bases as something, which is something they have done in the past, as far as I'm aware. But they basically completely indiscriminately started mowing down civilians, like the elderly, children, women. They've taken hostages in order to blackmail the Israelis into not hitting them back. So, that's a horrific moral conundrum that Netanyahu and the Israeli military find themselves in. I imagine that those hostages aren't actually going to stop them, which is difficult. But it is important to note that this wasn't just a Zionist versus anti-Zionist thing, because if it was, why exactly are you targeting civilians? Now, there's a defense for that. It's not my defense. There's another reaction to this, which is that it's good that Hamas is attacking Israel, but it's bad the means they're choosing. I've actually heard this a decent amount, which is just kind of jarring. But the idea is that essentially, if you're an anti-Zionist, if you don't believe that Israel, the state, should exist, but you believe the Jewish people are fine and shouldn't be killed. Now, it's difficult to draw a distinction between those two things, but there is a distinction, at least theoretically, to say, no, I don't like the state of Israel, but yes, I'm perfectly fine with the Jewish people and they should continue to exist. Those people tend to believe that Palestine has been oppressed and that their land was unfairly taken when the UK gave Israel the charter over their section of that part of the world. And therefore, Hamas is completely within its bounds to attack Israel to try to get their land back. But these people would agree that attacking civilians is a bad way to do it, and is, immoral for the obvious reasons why it's the most evil thing you can possibly think of. That's one perspective. There's another perspective, which is cycle of violence, which is basically the centrist position, which basically says that, well, it's really complicated, which is true. And both countries have wronged each other, which is at least arguable. That part is too complicated for me to say for sure, but is certainly arguable. And therefore, this was inevitable, and it's just one more strike in the cycle of violence. One more strike in the cycle of violence. So those are the people in the middle who are just like, oh, this is horrible. Look at this tragedy. Look at this continuing cycle of violence. It's kind of a level of moral equivalence. We've gone from, Palestine's in the right, but is using Palestine's in the right completely. Hamas is in the right, but using evil tactics, to complete moral equivalence. Now, on the other side, you have people who say that Hamas is completely in the wrong because of those tactics, regardless of whether or not they're right about wanting Israel back. And then there's the last one, which is just Israel has a right to exist and should be able to defend itself, and Hamas is completely wrong both for its tactics and for attacking it all. So those are those are like kind of roughly the five positions that I have seen. And if we go through them one by one, I mean, obviously the one saying that Hamas is doing nothing wrong is absolutely insane. It's complete moral insanity. I have heard from people who hold this position, like through online, but I've never actually met somebody like this in person. But you can best believe that everybody who is in Hamas, and a decent amount of people in Iran and in Palestine, not all of them, because many civilians are completely innocent, but there's some of them in there who probably believe that as well. They want to, from the river to the sea, right? Means just basically push all the Jews into the sea. Now, what Hamas will do and what the Palestinian Authority will do is that they'll dance on the line between saying, when they say that, they just mean they want to get rid of Israel. They don't really mean kill all the Jews. But as we saw today, they weren't attacking military targets. Now, the defense for this, the apologetics for this, is that Hamas is incapable of attacking military targets because Israel's military is too sophisticated, and therefore, to throw off their oppression, they have no choice but to engage in terrorism. I have actually met people who have said something like this, who say, of course, the tactics are bad, but they're also inevitable, and it's actually Israel's fault because Israel's military is basically too sophisticated for Hamas to attack, so instead they have to do terroristic tactics to try to break the spirit of Israel. First of all, you were sorely mistaken. They are going to rain hell upon Hamas and the rest of Palestine, unfortunately. Fortunately on Hamas, rest of Palestine kind of unfortunately. So first of all, they were very wrong. But second of all, that's a level of apologetics where you need to look at yourself in the mirror and realize that you're the bad guy. There is no justification for the slaughter of innocents, for the intentional targeting, the intentional and explicit targeting of civilians. Like, terroristic tactics are never moral, ever. And saying that it's Israel's fault that Hamas is doing it this way is a level of it's a level of moral twist that's almost impossible to comprehend. But I've met people who believe this sort of thing. And it's also just wrong because Hamas has attacked military bases, and this attack was extremely sophisticated. Iran had a hand in it, reportedly, both in the funding, of course, but also in the planning. And therefore, if you can do something this sophisticated, as much as like take down the touch fence, I'm pretty sure if you wanted to like aim at military bases specifically, you could. They could have done that. The reason they didn't do that is because they know, even though they could specifically target military bases, that they have no chance of winning because the Israeli Defense Force is one of the most sophisticated militaries on the planet. So they thought that their best bet was to, go after them like spiritually and go after the civilians. And, they did a typical thing that they tend to do, which is attack during a Jewish holiday or like right after when, they're sleeping. So yeah. Again, there's real people who believe this. There's real people on campuses. I've seen the official position come out of on-campus groups. Palestinian groups will blame it on Israel. They'll say, well, you can't tell an oppressed people how to throw off their oppression. You can't do that. Wrong. I absolutely can do that. If you're an oppressed person, that does not give you the right to murder civilians. Actually, that's not a thing. Actually, I'm smiling because it's like the only reaction I could have. The argument is so absurd that I'm smiling at it because the equivalence is to think about the moral implications of what that means for the type of person who would say that. And we're trying to keep things relatively light here as much as we can, while also respecting the subject matter. So that's a real position. That position's insane. I absolutely can tell people how oppressed people should throw off their oppression. They should do it by like not murdering babies, like not like abortion murdering babies, not like turn of phrase, although turn of phrase doesn't make it not true, but like literally murdering infants. Like that's literally things that happen, randomly gunning down cars, driving down the street, random civilians, women and children, elderly, targeting explicitly and specifically. There is zero moral defense for this. None. It doesn't exist. You can only theoretically find one in like some trolley problem thought experiment. There is no situation in the real world where this is okay. So they can tell you that. They can give you the phrases. They can give you the what's the word? The not the semantics. The euphemisms. You can give you the euphemisms of you can't tell them how to throw off their oppression. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You do it by not killing innocent people. So that's number one. The middle moral equivalence position. This also comes from an agnosticism around the legitimacy of the state of Israel. Again, the way that things sit, as far as I'm aware, this issue is extremely complicated. But again, as far as I'm aware, Israel has broadly left the Gaza Strip alone. I don't think that they have been invading the Gaza Strip or attempting to take it over in any way, only to deal with Hamas, because Hamas likes to throw rockets into civilian populations, and Israel doesn't really like that very much. But the moral equivalence thing, the cycle of violence thing doesn't make sense if you're a Zionist. However, if you believe in anti-Zionism, if you believe that the state of Israel shouldn't exist, because for whatever reason, usually the argument you hear is that it's basically colonialist, right? Because the UK took Palestine, which was never really a country; it was more of a territory, and they gave part of it to Israel to be theirs. And therefore, there's lots of people on the left, especially in the West, who don't like colonialism, and this is like one of the most recent examples of colonialism and indigenous people having their land stolen from them. I'm using quotes because I don't want to endorse that view. I'm not necessarily saying it's wrong. I'm just making sure that you guys all know that that's not necessarily my belief. That is their belief. And because of that, of course, they think that Israel shouldn't exist, and that therefore Israel's mere existence is an offense against Palestine and the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, because they're occupiers is the word that they tend to use, and then therefore any and all violence. Much of the violence that comes out of Hamas towards Israel is perfectly justified because Israel's mere existence is the first aggression. Now, that's an argument that's kind of interesting. It doesn't defend the evil tactics, and the people in the middle who I've met, who I talked to about this, are completely horrified about how they've attacked civilians. Completely horrifying. They also recognize it's completely detrimental, right? Because this attack does nothing. All it does is make people coalesce around Israel more correctly, and it is going to get a whole bunch of Palestinian civilians killed in the crossfire. So this attack does not even advance the cause of anti-Zionism in any real way. It probably puts it back for the people who want that sort of thing, which is not exactly advisable in my mind. But that's the position. That's how they kind of have a level of neutrality. They think the tactics are completely evil, but they think that they think it's evil, but they also think that it's kind of inevitable. And while it's an unjustified escalation, it's still an escalation of just a conflict that's been happening. You see this from people like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar. They've been tweeting out stuff like that, which is like, let's look for peace. Let's recognize our shared humanity. I feel for all of the Israelis who are killed in these terror attacks, and I also feel for the Palestinians who are being held in an open-air prison. I don't know why it's an open air prison. I think the argument for why it's an open air prison is because Israel won't give all of Israel to them, and therefore they're keeping them in that area, which isn't really true, because you could attempt to immigrate and become a citizen of Israel, or you could move somewhere else. So they're not really in a prison, but euphemisms, So this is the type of like the moral equivalence position where it's like it's a cycle, and I don't like these tactics, but also Israel kind of started it, and blah, blah, blah. I think this position is also very morally dubious, if not outright bad itself. I don't think that you can draw a moral equivalence to Israel, wanting to continue to exist. Like, again, you can say that like it doesn't have a right to exist because, it took land from the people who were there first. You can say that. But even then, even if I'd agreed with that, there is no moral equivalence just saying I want to exist, and then the guys who want your land coming in and killing civilians. Like, I don't think there's a moral equivalence there, even if I agreed with your premise. But that premise is actually a problem. And the reason why that premise is a problem is because technically that premise applies to every country on the face of the earth. There is no country on the face of the earth that was not forcibly... all of the land on earth is soaked with blood. There is no piece of land on God's green earth, as far as I'm aware, except for, maybe Antarctica and some remote places like that haven't been, forcefully taken at some point by somebody. If you take this principle to its logical conclusion, then, America doesn't have a right to exist. No European country has a right to exist. No country has a right to exist under this logic, except, literally none. You can make an argument for Russia because Russia is really, really old, but even then, like, it has so many revolutions. It's just... But the reason that they can make the argument so colorably with Israel is just because it happened it happened the most recently. But again, that principle kind of creates... If you follow that principle to its logical conclusion, you reach the conclusion is one of absurdity. You just have to disregard the legitimacy of all countries. I could argue, and the Jews, and Israel would argue, well, actually, Palestine took Israel from us forcefully. Israel was actually originally ours until we were driven out by the Romans. which is true. So, Israel could actually pull rank that way and say, actually, we were the original indigenous and oppressed people, and we're just coming back to take our stuff back. But going back that far in history isn't something that people who defend Palestine really want to do, which is very interesting because that's not just like a biblical story. It is a biblical story, but it's also very well historically documented. It's not really a debate that the Jewish people lived in Jerusalem and then that area of Israel 2,000 years ago, if not more. So that kind of like middle ground, the cycle of violence, the moral equivalence position doesn't really hold the way that people. It's not really the moral neutral ground, I don't think. If you haven't been able to tell, I tend to support Israel in this in a pretty strong way. I think that there's a interesting debate, like I said, around Zionism itself, or whether Israel's a legitimate state in terms of how it was created, because it was kind of artificially put there by the UK, but like the 13 colonies were created the same way, right? A lot of countries were created the same way of the UK saying, okay, well, here's my territory. I'm going to let these people run it. And then eventually that group of people got independence. Like, again, if Israel isn't a legitimate state, then no country that was ever like ran by the UK, that was ever ran by Britain, is legitimate either. And, you can hold to that position. You can, and you can be logically consistent, but that's not a conclusion I'm really willing to draw. I think it's kind of absurd. So I tend to say that Israel, yes, in fact, probably does have a right to exist just as much as any other country anyway. Um, just as much as any other country has a right to exist. Let's say that. But obviously the attacks are just horrible. And then finally you have people who are on the complete Israel side. So I'm almost completely there, but the other people on Israel, the, I guess, furthest pro-Israel side you could possibly be is say there is no difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. That's something I've been hearing a lot. And I'm very sympathetic to it because it seems true in practice. Because, like we said, all we've been seeing for the people who say that they're anti-Zionist are activities that are very much anti-Semitic, which is not attacking military bases, but attacking civilians and just killing as many Jews as possible. And the most horrific human rights atrocities we've ever seen, the worst terrorist attacks since 9/11, if not later, if not earlier, rather. So horrific stuff. I do think, though, theoretically speaking, there is a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, but I'm highly sympathetic to the idea that there's not a difference in reality because I haven't really seen one, at least in terms of people on the ground. So at least in terms of like the people actually engaged in the conflict themselves, there doesn't really seem to be a difference. Although, people commenting on the matter will draw the distinction. And I'm sure the distinction for them is legitimate, but that's because the conflict for them is purely theoretical. So there is some level of interesting debate here about the differences between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, like I said. But fundamentally, there's no moral equivalence here. There's not. And the people who say that there are misrepresenting reality. Because the fact of the matter is that Israel left Gaza pretty much alone, and they give it free water and they give it a free electricity, and they're never going to be happy with that. Israel has made several peace agreements, giving them, offering land, two-state solution type of stuff. It's been repeatedly shot down. The Hamas and the Palestinian Authority don't really want a two-state solution. They don't want Israel to exist, and they seem to want to make that happen, not by like asking the UN to like redistribute the Jews across the globe, which I don't even know how that would even happen, and that's probably technically a genocide since exile is genocide, technically speaking. But they don't seem to want to do that. They want to seem to do it the old-fashioned way of killing all the Jews way. So complete atrocities coming out of there. But luckily, Israel's military is extremely effective, and you can best believe they're going to open. You can best believe that Hamas has opened the gates of hell on themselves, and I don't think things are going to go particularly well for them going forward. One angle to this that we haven't covered yet is U.S. duplicity. So, you thought you were feeling bad, wait to feel even worse. Because the thing is that the U.S. gives money and aid to the Palestinian Authority and to the Iranian mullahs who help fund the Palestinian Authority, and fund Hamas. Your tax dollars go to that, actually. So, congratulations. A couple of weeks ago, Joe Biden unfroze funds for Iran that were supposed to be used for humanitarian reasons. But as we know, money is fungible. If money is coming in for one thing, then it means you don't have to. That means you can use money somewhere else where you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So there's no real like money is fungible. So even if I believed that somehow that money was kept only towards humanitarian aid, which I don't, but even if I did believe that, all that means is that they freed up money to be used elsewhere. So your tax dollar is hard at work, ladies and gentlemen. So go watch the videos, go watch them, do it. Here in the West, we are very spoiled. We've forgotten what real evil looks like. Go watch the videos. Go see the real evil. Realize that your tax dollars have in part paid for that, and then vote accordingly is what I would say. Is partly what I would say. But of course, what I'd say is that my thoughts and my prayers, to use a cliche term, but there's really nothing else I or anybody in my type of position, just being somebody who lives in the West, can do other than donation. You can give your thoughts and prayers. Those are useful. Israel has been asking for prayers from around the world, so do that. But also, there's donation portals. Friends of the IDF is one. There's multiple other donation portals that you can find on the internet. They are very readily available. Make sure you go through official sites, not GoFundMe's, generally just to be on the safe side. So Friends of the IDF is one that I know. The Fellowship of Christian and Jews is another one. So if you want to make a difference, thoughts, prayers, and go ahead and donate if you are able, because regardless of what you think about the Israel-Palestine conflict on a pure geopolitical level, there's been a slaughter of innocents, and Israel has to go take care of business to protect its people. So if you believe like I believe, go ahead and support them. So next story of the day, just to avoid getting too deep into the depression, because I could talk about this forever, it is Christopher Columbus Day, or as people like to say now, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. So there's an interesting philosophical debate here, and it's actually kind of bigger than one might think it is. And the real matter isn't really about Christopher Columbus. It's kind of just what moral metrics do we use to analyze our historical figures. So for those who don't know, Christopher Columbus did not discover America first, actually. There was a Viking who did it first. His name was Leif Erikson. So people have been memeing about that a little bit. But he was an Italian sailor. He was looking for India, but he wound up running into America. And because he did what he did, and because he took the risks that he did, he set off a chain of events that created the United States of America. I kind of like the United States of America, and therefore I'm glad Christopher Columbus existed. Now, that is a very controversial claim, because part of what Christopher Columbus did was involving bad stuff to the Native Americans, very bad stuff. Most of it was involuntary smallpox spread. Some of it was voluntary smallpox spread. Some of it was a little bit of biological war, and there were real bad stuff. However, it's not actually as bad as what people want you to think it is. So Howard Zinn wrote his work on Christopher Columbus and made him out to be a genocidal maniac. Christopher Columbus was not a genocidal maniac. He was not exactly a great guy. He was a wretched sinner in many ways, and he did do truly, truly evil things. But a lot of the sources that Howard Zinn drew upon and that people in modernity draw upon were people who were Columbus's political enemies, which makes the reliability of their testimony like not super great. So if you're interested in that, you should look into it. You should look into the history of Christopher Columbus and who he actually was, because while yes, many Native Americans died through smallpox, both involuntarily spread and voluntarily spread, and through multiple acts of true deep evil, it also isn't probably quite as bad as you have been told, just because Howard Zinn has such a big influence and Howard Zinn's sources were extremely biased. So that's a little bit of historical trivia for you there today. But back to the major philosophical question is that what do we judge Columbus for? What do we judge our historical figures for? My standard is I try to judge historical figures based on what was unique about them. And the reason for that is because why am I remembering them otherwise? So this was a time where conquering was common, and where death was common, and where all of these evil things were common. And so I have this one guy who has done the same thing that everybody around him and his entire culture have been doing forever. But he also did something important that was unique. And so what makes it more sense when I'm viewing him through history? What does it make more sense to view him for? To me personally, I think it's the unique thing. And this applies to Columbus because Columbus was unique in his ability to, in his discovery and the chain of events he set off, but he wasn't unique as far as the impact of explorers on the lands that they find. So that's number one. And this works the other way too. Like, let's talk about Hitler, right? Like, Hitler went to an art school and he had a normal upbringing in many ways. He went to art school and he had an upbringing that he had a family and he had a dog and he lived in Germany. But like, we don't really remember him for that. For fact where he grew up. Well, he grew up in Austria and he lived in Germany. Whatever, you get the point. The stuff that's common about him is not the stuff we remember. We remember him for the unique thing he did because it was uniquely evil. And we don't remember George Washington for the evil stuff that he did that was normal, like slavery, although some people do remember him for that. But while he did have slaves, which is true and real evil, that's not really what defines him. Why isn't that what defines him? Because that's not what was unique about him. Everybody in his station had slaves. Almost everybody. It was not the unique thing. The unique thing is that he founded the United States of America. And to me, the United States of America is really good, and it has created positive cultural change the world over, many times over. It saved Europe from the Nazis in many ways. It's abolished slavery eventually. America is pretty good. I realize this is a controversial claim now, but I think America is good. And therefore, when I remember George Washington, what do I remember him for? For the sins that were common or for his virtues that were uncommon? And to me, remembering people for what was unique about them through history is what makes sense. However, even if you don't buy that argument, there's still a third argument which is that his personal character isn't really the issue. So I saw this tweet from a man named Spencer Klavan. He's the son of Andrew Klavan. He's an interesting guy. I like him quite a bit. And so this was an article that he wrote, and I'm going to read it because he's probably just said what I said, but much better. So, quote, "I will not defend the personal virtue of Christopher Columbus. It's not what's at issue. Here's what is at issue. In an era of struggle and conquest, one wretched sinner undertook a journey of staggering hardship that would have had his critics whimpering like children on day one. He displayed industry, determination, and courage. At the end of his journey, he landed in the Bahamas among other wretched sinners, and by the grace of God, he set in motion a chain of events that would make possible a republic, a beacon of liberty to the whole world. We celebrate Columbus because without him, there would not be this nation, and we believe that this nation is good. We are glad and proud to exist, wretched sinners that we are, because our failures are not what is remarkable about us. They are the norm in this tormented world. What is remarkable is that for hundreds of years, we have as a nation been better than most, industrious and courageous like Columbus, but also just and marvelously free. That heritage, that triumph, is what's really under assault today, and that, oh yes, I will defend." So he said what I said, but just much better. If you cannot tell, I took inspiration from him. I think that this is 100% right. But it's the end there that I want to focus on. He's saying that it's not Columbus's personal character that's at issue here. When people attack Columbus Day, they will bring up Christopher Columbus's personal character and his actions. But according to Mr. Spencer Klavan, a verbal billionaire, which is what he calls himself on Twitter. Hold on. We gotta see this. Oh no, not that. Anyway, on Twitter, his handle is that he's a verbal billionaire. But it's because I think he's written a billion words, which is pretty incredible. Or he's read a billion words. I don't know what the inside joke is. But he says that that heritage, the triumph of America existing and America being good, and it being good that America was founded by Columbus, that's what Klavan says is under attack. And it's not really about Columbus's personal character. It's about the character of the country at large. HUUI man says America. Yes, America. We do like America. And I think that this is Klavan's point. I think he's right. I think that fundamentally the attack on Columbus Day isn't really about Columbus's personal character. It's more just about the character of America. I think it's just a level of dislike for America, at least for most people. I'm sure that there are a great cadre of people who it really is about Columbus personally for them. But I think for many, even if they don't realize it, it is kind of about just not liking America very much. And you see this, like the Venn diagram of people who really, really, really hate Columbus Day and the people who just don't think America is good. That Venn diagram is almost a circle. There's a lot of overlap there, and I don't think that's an accident. Klavan doesn't think that's an accident either, and I tend to agree. And it's because I like America. It's because I think America is good that I celebrate Columbus Day instead of Indigenous Peoples Day. Because I like Indigenous peoples as much as the next guy. I think they're cool. I also think that the Indigenous peoples are not the people who made the modern United States of America possible. So on this day that is supposed to be a celebration of America and its existence, or one of our celebrations of America and its existence, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to celebrate the Indigenous people. It does make sense to celebrate Columbus or Washington or somebody else who actually had a hand in creating modern America. So that's what I submit to you as my defense of Columbus Day. It's not really about Columbus's personal character. It's about his actions. It's about what was unique about him. It wasn't about his common vices and his common sins, of which there were many and of they were very serious. It's about the virtues and the achievements that were unbelievably unique, that were unbelievably difficult, and that made this great nation, which is also characterized by similar, very unique virtues and very unique achievements, is what made this great nation possible. And therefore, it is good, and therefore, it should be celebrated. But if you're a person who just doesn't think America is very good and doesn't think America has much of a right to exist, then you can keep holding your opinion there. But at least that's more consistent. At least you're being honest. Okay, third and final story of today is Matt Gaetz. So Mr. Matthew Gaetz, he's a senator from Florida. Look at this. Look at the high-tech transition. I know you are all very impressed. My one viewer is extremely impressed. Soon to be multiple viewers over the course of time when I put this up as a video. But yeah. Hold on, I lost the Columbus thing. Yeah. So that's Matt Gaetz right there. You see him? Oh, yeah, I haven't transitioned yet. There we go. See? Subtle. I didn't even need to tell you that it was low tech because you couldn't see it yet. I just didn't realize it because I don't even understand the software properly yet. Anyway, this right here, that's Matt Gaetz. And this right here, that is McCarthy. So Andrew McCarthy, for those who don't know, I think his name is I think his first name is Andrew. See, now I don't remember. Kevin McCarthy. Why did I call him Andrew? I'm frazzled today. I'm sorry. I've just been thinking about the business in Israel more than anything. So I'm sorry for being frazzled. Kevin McCarthy was the former Speaker of the House of Representatives for the Republicans. I say former because he was removed. He was removed by Matt Gaetz and a Freedom Caucus. It was, Gaetz and a few other Republicans, and he was removed. Why was he removed? Well, that is a very good question. That is an extremely good question. That is the question that I am asking. Why was he removed? So the reason that Matt Gaetz will tell you is that basically he's saying that Kevin McCarthy was a disloyal R. He was a rhino. He was a Republican in name only. That he wasn't a real conservative and that he wasn't doing all he could. And the straw that allegedly broke the camel's back is the fact that Kevin McCarthy passed a clean resolution to stave off the shutdown of the government for 45 days. He said, okay, everything that we're currently funding, we will continue to funding for another 45 days, except for the Ukraine stuff, except for Ukrainian aid, and it will be and we're just we're kicking the can down the road 45 days. That's essentially what happened. Although that's not really what happened, because Kevin McCarthy actually founded some other debt limit or budget renegotiation bills earlier that were actually had more wins for Republicans that were actually shot down by Gaetz for not being sufficiently conservative. So Kevin McCarthy has theorized that Gaetz was planning this kind of all along for like a really long time, and he was sabotaging. Whether or not Gaetz was intentionally sabotaging, I leave that to you. I don't know. What I do know is that it does not cut the mustard with me when Gaetz says that McCarthy isn't doing enough, because I don't think anybody else in his position could be doing more, to be perfectly honest with you. Kevin McCarthy has like a 5-person majority in the House of Representatives or something. And it's a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president. So he's extremely limited. And Gaetz, and I like Gaetz. I got to tell you, I like him on a personal level. In terms of he's a conservative firebrand. So, it's very like on a gut level appealing. I get it. But you have a 5-person majority and only one in the House of Representatives, and you don't have anything else. You are in no position to be demanding the sun and the moon and the stars here. Like you can't deliver everything you want. It's just tactically not possible at this time. And so, Gates is really disappointed that he can't get more, but I'm pretty sure no matter who you put in there to replace McCarthy, you're not going to get much better results. Why would you? The situation hasn't changed. The math hasn't changed. Still in the exact same piss poor position. Except you actually have less room to negotiate because your reputation is taking a hit because you just got rid of your last speaker. I really don't think this is going to make any sort of change at all, because McCarthy has a decent history of success. Even with this continuing resolution that he had to, pull out of nowhere, he managed to get the Ukraine stuff paused. And regardless about how you feel about Ukrainian aid, would be a win in Gates's book. The last time we did a governmental negotiation, Biden said he wouldn't negotiate at all. McCarthy held fast. Oh, look at that. They negotiated, and they had a few good Republican wins that were big. There was something about what was it? Oh, yeah, it was like a work for welfare. It was saying that if you're able to work, then you can't have welfare if you're not actively looking for work or working. That was a big one. That's huge. That's massive. I think that actually eventually got killed, but that wasn't because of McCarthy. I think that was for other reasons. I think Gates might have killed it, actually. See, now I don't remember. Nikes. I'm gonna look it up. Okay, everybody, go look up what I just said and to make sure I'm not wrong. To my 0 viewers now, my the America guy left. It's very sad. Yeah. So, the only thing that the people who are on Gates' side can say is that McCarthy has before he was speaker, he had not a great record, which is true, but doesn't really matter in this case, except for their last argument, which is that McCarthy should have let the government fail. And the fact that he didn't let the government fail and that he played ball with Biden shows that he's insufficiently conservative. I think this argument is wrong. I think that it's tactically stupid. And the reason for that is because it pulls the attention back onto the Republicans, right? Because Biden this time said that he was willing to negotiate. Last time, you could play hardball because Biden said he wasn't willing to negotiate. And if the government failed, then he gets to look like the bad guy. Great. But in this case, Biden says he is willing to negotiate, and it would be the Republicans looking intransigent. So why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because it looks real bad, and it makes voting for you harder, and it distracts from all of Biden's failings. Now, none of this seems to matter. Now, none of this really matters anymore because the black hole of what's going on between Israel and Hamas kind of just drawn all of the oxygen out of the room, and nobody really focused on anything else. Rightly, because again, worst terror attack we've ever seen since 2001, if not more. So rightly, but even though this feels irrelevant, it's still worth doing a little bit of analysis on it. And really, that's the reality. The reality is that if the Republicans let there be a default because you didn't get the completely unreasonable things that Gates wanted, that's bad for Republicans. It distracts from the mistakes that Biden is making. It distracts from the economy. It distracts from a million different things. It makes the Republicans look worse. So why not pass a continuing resolution to continue to negotiate? Why not? I don't know why not. Now, according to Gates, the government sucks and we should shut it down because of raw principle, and how it looks doesn't matter. And if we're even able to get benefits, doesn't matter. It just matters that, we live up to abstract principle regardless of the practical results. That's not really how I think about politics. That's not how I think anybody should think about politics. But regardless of what I think, Gates managed to get Kevin McCarthy out. He did. And now there is a scramble. It looks like it's going to be Jim Jordan. For a second, Donald Trump said that he might be speaker, which would have been super funny. Sorry, guys. Which would have been very funny, but that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Kevin McCarthy said that he might actually run again. I don't know why I keep saying his full name. McCarthy might actually run again, but Jim Jordan is also looking like he wants to be it. But that doesn't make sense, though, right? Because everybody likes Jim Jordan. You think Jim Jordan's really conservative? I like Jim Jordan. But guess who Jim Jordan endorsed? Jim Jordan endorsed Kevin McCarthy for speaker. He thought it was fine. So all of the equivalents, all of the people who are set up to replace McCarthy are the exact same people who wanted McCarthy to stay. So it's gonna be weird. But currently that's how things stands. The last thing that's of note is that the reason why Gates was ready to get rid of McCarthy is because the original speakership battle that put him in office in the first place included it only takes one person to create a vote of no confidence. And that kind of really reduced the speaker's power. So, I don't know if that clause is going to stay for the next speaker. If the next speaker is smart, they won't keep that clause, because that means that, at any time, an intransigent minority can just boot them, as we saw here. So that's as things stand in the House right now. So I think that's going to do us for today. I'll be uploading this as a video to YouTube and Rumble. Thank you for the one guy who interacted. Very nice. But of course, great tragedy in Israel for everybody in the Western world. Most people in the Western world would agree that what's happening in Israel is an absolute tragedy, completely unconscionable. Even if they're anti-Zionists, and most anti-Zionists agree that this is completely unconscionable violence. So please send aid. The Fellowship of Christian and Jews, Friends of the IDF. You can give aid if you can. If you can't, or even if you can, thoughts and prayers go a long way. Israel has called for prayer. So, do that. Remember that. Keep it in the forefront of your mind. How lucky we are here in the West, in our spoiled little cradle, that we are constantly, chipping away at ourselves. If we keep chipping away, real evil's on the other side. So remember that, and keep people in your prayers. Donate if you can. Tomorrow, Don is one of my co-hosts on the Royal Rumble. My favorite sparring buddy. He is Jewish, and he's going to be interviewed by Travis, who is the god of our Pangburn universe here. So they're doing an interview tomorrow, all about the conflict, all about how it's affected him. I believe. So look out for that. That's going to be on the main channel, not on our Rinky Dink side channel. So go check that out. It's worth checking out. And I think that's all I have to say for you this time. So thank you all for watching. Those who did, those who are watching on video after the fact, thank you for participating as well. Thank you for making it to the end. You're a real one. So be safe. And take care, everybody. Take care of yourselves, and see you all next time. Bye bye.